Be agreed to. Sue Moroney.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And it is my pleasure to rise and speak to the third reading. Seems like an awful long time to get to the third reading, but indeed the third reading of the Hamilton City Council Parana Park Vesting Bill 2010. And may I take the opportunity first of all to congratulate the Hamilton City Council for their drafting of this piece of legislation, and the member who sponsored the bill through the House, David Bennett, for his shepherding of this bill through the House. Probably not as quickly as he imagined it was going to be shepherded through, but nonetheless, here we are. We've arrived at the third reading, and I congratulate that member for, I think, getting perhaps when the vote is taken at the end of this debate, I think perhaps his first piece of legislation through Parliament. Yes? Am I correct in that? First private bill. Okay. It's first piece of legislation, I think, through the House. So congratulations to David Bennett for that. Mr Speaker, I do, though, want to just note that I think the Hamilton City Council will be very pleased at the passing of this bill. It has been uncontroversial, but it does vest the land in council as a recreation reserve, and it is an important piece of land for our city. And I'll want to acknowledge that and talk about that a little bit later on as well in my contribution. But look, I think probably this would be the only piece of legislation that the Hamilton City Council that has seen come through this Parliament in the term of this government that actually they could say much that was very positive about. Because what we have is the Hamilton City Council actually really struggling at the moment and looking at having to impose an 8% rate increase on ratepayers because basically the economy has fallen so flat in Hamilton. So flat because that government's had no plan to get economic growth happening in the regions up and down the country, and that has landed, as it has in many other places in this country, in Hamilton. So the Hamilton City Council's facing some very, very difficult decisions at this point in time, Mr Speaker, because one of the things that has become a really big financial issue for the Hamilton City Council is they've had a huge drop-off in the development contributions coming forward that help to fund that council's operations. And what's the reason for that, Mr Speaker? The reason for that is that economic growth has bottomed out so badly in Hamilton that there's just no building going on. There is no new development going on in Hamilton.
Point of order, Paul Quinn.
I would draw your attention to the relevance of the last minute or two of the Speaker's speech.
I've been listening. Sue Moroney.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'm so pleased that you are listening because this is a very important issue for the Hamilton City Council, who of course have brought this bill forward to get the flexibility around this piece of land. And really what I'm saying is that this is a positive piece of legislation for the City Council, and thank goodness, because it's about the only one that has come through this Parliament in the course of this government's term that has actually done something even slightly positive for Hamilton, because it has fallen flat. There is no development and new building going on in Hamilton, and so therefore, well, talk to Hamilton City Council, Mr Bennett, and what you'll find is that their development, the budget that they had for the development levies they thought they would get from new developments has completely fallen on its face. And the reason for that is because it is true, and I think if you read the papers, if you read the council papers, you'll see that the development levies have reduced by about 200% on what they were budgeted to be for this financial year, because they were budgeting as if they had a Labor government in place, where the economic growth was actually fast and furious in Hamilton City, and there was major building going on. There was major building going on in Hamilton City under a Labor government. But of course we knew how to plan for economic growth, and this government does not. So therefore we've got Hamilton City Council in exactly that situation, where the ratepayers are now going to have to foot an 8% increase in their rates because that government has no plan for improving the economic performance in cities just like Hamilton. But what it's got to do with the bill is that here we are with the Hamilton City Council trying to get something positive happening in their city, and they are succeeding. And it's not going to, unfortunately though, it's not going to do anything to lift economic performance. It's not going to do a thing to lift economic performance, and so I guess they felt that they could trust the honourable member David Bennett to actually bring this piece of legislation through. But I do want to spend the remaining time of my speech actually paying homage to George Parr, who did gift this land to the Hamilton City Council. And I think it was very honourable because, again, I think it shows a really strong contrast between George Parr and his intentions, moving privately owned land, which in fact was confiscated land actually. It was confiscated from Tainui, came into his hands. Privately he owned that land. What did he do? He gifted that to the public. He gifted that private land to the public of New Zealand and made it available for everyone. In contrast to that government and its plans to sell state assets out of public ownership into private hands. And how disappointed would George Parr be in the version of the National Party today to know that his benevolence and the leadership that he was trying to give to our city and to successfully give to our city is completely dismissed by this government, that they want to do something quite different and they want to do the opposite. He, as a private individual, gifted land to our city that is enjoyed by everyone. Small children, older people, right through the age groups, and there are many happy memories that I know many families, that are made for many families in Parana Park. And yes, it was particularly poignant, I think, this year to go to the Anzac Day ceremonies on Memorial Park, just right adjacent to Parana Park, given that we've had so much robust debate in this House about that parcel of land. And I was very pleased to join the members opposite at the Anzac Day ceremonies, both the Dawn Parade and the civic ceremony it felt like the middle of the day after you'd got up for Dawn Parade, but it was in fact the middle of the morning for the civic ceremony, and joined thousands of other Hamiltonians with that as well. And that is the legacy of George Parr, to allow a piece of land to be developed, to be used for the good of everyone in Hamilton City, as he did do, but sadly the government opposite is doing the opposite when it comes to the public ownership of state assets. The other thing that I'd really like to make sure is mentioned in the third reading on this debate about George Parr is that he was a rail enthusiast. What a visionary man of his time. Even back then, George Parr wanted to get a train service up and running between Kawhia and Hamilton. And I think that shows great vision. Well, what I can tell that member opposite, he's just asked me what I'm advocating for. Well, I welcome the opportunity to explain that I am advocating for and supporting a passenger train service between Hamilton and Auckland. You know, the largest city in New Zealand and the fourth largest city in New Zealand, 121 k's of straight railway line track between Hamilton and Auckland. We own the tracks, we own the trains, and that government's too miserable to establish a passenger train service between Auckland and Hamilton. And that, Mr Speaker, is what I would call a no-brainer, and that, Mr Speaker, is what I would venture to I'd venture to think that George Parr would also call a no-brainer as well, because even back in the 1920s, George Parr got it. He understood that train transport and public transport was the way of the future, not, just continuing only to build more and more roads, but actually give people a choice of transport options and options that work for the future. Mr Speaker, in closing, I want to congratulate the Hamilton City Council once again and pledge my party's support and my personal support also for the passing of the Hamilton City Council Parana Park Vesting Bill 2010.